graphite level, we discussed briefly the use of price retracements. Price retracements are a very powerful technique, but which set of numbers should we use? Should we use Gann numbers, Fibonacci numbers? In this session, we're going to look at the history of the price retracement technique and which numbers traders should use and where these numbers come from. The first person we're going to visit in our journey through history is the legendary trader W.D. Gann. In the first half of the 20th century, the famous trader W.D. Gann said, "Every stock makes a top or bottom on some exact mathematical point in proportion to some previous high or low level." Now, what did he mean by that? How did he use this concept when trading? W.D. Gann came out with a stock market course, and he has a subheading entitled 1/8 points, and this is what he had to say about retracements. He said, "Take the extreme low and extreme high of an important move. Subtract the low from the high to get the range. Then divide the range of fluctuation by 8 to get the 1/8 points, which are resistance levels or buying and selling points. When a stock stops around these levels and makes a top or bottom on or near them and shows a turn on the trend line, this is a place to buy or sell." So according to Gann, if we divide a range into eighths, we'll get the following percentages. We'll get 12.5%, 25, 37.5, 50, 62.5, 75, and 87.5%. Now it's interesting, Gann didn't say that all of these percentages had equal value. He believed that some of them worked better than others. So this is what else he had to say about these eighth levels. In the same course by W.D. Gann, there's also a heading entitled The Order of Resistance Levels. And this is what he has to say. When a stock is advancing and crosses the quarter point, the next most important point to watch is the halfway point, or gravity center, or the average of the move fluctuation. Then the next point above the halfway point is 5/8. The next and strongest point after the halfway point is crossed is the 3/4 point. Then if the range is very wide, it is important to watch the 7/8 point of the move. Notice that Gann places emphasis on both the 50% level and the 75% level. We'll be revisiting Gann here in a moment and looking at these numbers again. But in the meantime, let's talk about another person that used retracements, and his name was R.N. Elliott. Now, R.N. Elliott is famous for his wave principle book that was published in 1938, and around the same time, after the publishing of the wave principle, he published a paper written by him, and he starts to discuss the relationship between the stock market, the wave principle, and Fibonacci numbers. So who or what is Fibonacci? Leonardo Fibonacci was an Italian mathematician. He introduced the Arabic numbering system to the West. In 1202, he wrote Liber Abaci, or the Book of Calculation. In this book is the famous rabbit problem. Fibonacci poses a problem that gives rise to a series of numbers that to this day are referred to as the Fibonacci series of numbers. Now, this is the problem. He states, how many pairs of rabbits placed in an enclosed area can be produced in a single year from one pair of rabbits if each pair gives birth to a new pair each month, starting with the second month? From the rabbit problem, we get an additive sequence that emerges. If you look over here on the left, this is how the sequence starts. You take 0 plus 1 equals 1. And what we do is we need to add these two numbers together to get the next number. So I'm adding 1 plus 1. Here's 1 plus 1 equals 2. Now to get the next number, we take this number and this number. 1 plus 2 equals 3. So you notice this 1 plus 2 equals 3. Now from this equation, we add 2 and 3 together to get 5. Notice 2 plus 3 equals 5. Now we add 3 plus 5 together, we get 3 plus 5 equals 8. 5 plus 8 equals 13, so 5 plus 8 equals 13. 8 plus 13 equals 21, so 8 plus 13 is 21. 13 plus 21, 34. 21 plus 34, 55, and so on. So if we keep doing this, there's a number of different fractions that we can derive from this. For an example, 0 and 1, 1 divided by 0 is in decimal form 0. 1 divided by 1 is 1. 1 divided by 2 is the fraction of 1/2 or 0.5 in decimal form. 2 plus 3, we get 2 divided by 3 gives us 0.666 over here. 3 divided by 5 gives us 0.6. 5 divided by 8, 0.625. 8 divided by 13, 6153. And as the number series goes higher, you'll notice that over here, this number starts to approach what is referred to as the golden mean. Two numbers originate from this number series that we see over here, the relationship between these two numbers, 34 and 55. By dividing these numbers, you will get 0.618, and by reversing it, you'll get 1.618. 1.618 is also referred to as phi. Now, where did that come from? Well, Phidias was instrumental in building the Parthenon in Greece, and the number 1.618 and its reciprocal 0.618 was used in the construction of the Parthenon. And so 1.618, if you were to spell Phidias in Greek, the first letter would be phi, and so now mathematicians will use this symbol, the phi symbol of the Greek alphabet, to be equivalent to 1.618. And when they write down phi, they use a capital PHI to describe 1.618. The reciprocal of 1.618 is called phi, and a smaller phi, lowercase phi in Greek, is used. And notice when we're writing it in letters, Latin letters, we use the small p to describe 0.618. So there's a difference between phi and phi. And it reminds me of Jack and the Beanstalk, fee, fi, fo, fum. I think maybe the Masons came up with that nursery rhyme. And there's some hidden code in there. So if anyone knows what that is, what fo and fum are, let me know. Now, interestingly enough, R.N. Elliott wrote a book in 1946 before he died, and he called it Nature's Law, The Secret of the Universe. Now, in this publication, he discusses the relationship between the Giza pyramid and phi. Now, I'm sure that for many years, people thought he was nuts because he's trying to relate the Pyramid of Giza to the stock market. And for a while, I thought he was nuts too. But then I read another book by another trader who was talking about the same thing, and it was quite a few years later. And I thought, oh great, another nut talking about the pyramids and the stock market. This Australian fellow, Bryce Gilmore, wrote his first book called Geometry of the Markets in 1986, and then he wrote Geometry of the Markets 2, and he's really the first one that drew attention to the root of phi and the root of phi. which are 1.272 and 0.786. Now these numbers are really important, and they do appear in the Giza pyramid. In Geometry of the Markets 2, Bryce shows the cross-section through a pyramid to get a triangle. So this triangle here, taken out of the pyramid, has these proportions. 1.618 on the hypotenuse, and the square root of 1.618 at the height of the triangle here, which comes to 1.272. Now Bryce takes this a step further and proposes that we move these ratios around a bit. So for an example, we take 1.272, the height, and move this number to the base, and we get another ratio. Now the height is 1.618, and the hypotenuse is 2.058. So we can keep moving the height to the base and getting more and more ratios that go higher. Now we can do the same in reverse as well. We can get a contracting number series. Once again, we take the slice of the triangle from the pyramid, and now this time we're going to use the square root of phi, which is 0.786. As you can see, 786 here is the height. If the hypotenuse is 1, then the base is 0.618. Now if you move 786 over to the hypotenuse, we get another ratio. Now 618 becomes the height and 0.486 becomes the base. So we get a contracting number series from this exercise. These triangles are also referred to as triangles of Price, named after Professor Price, and also Kepler's triangles. Johannes Kepler was a German mathematician and astronomer from the 16th century who discovered that the Earth and planets travel around the Sun in ellipses, elliptical orbits. Kepler triangles combine two key mathematical concepts, the Pythagorean theorem and the golden ratio. Now this fascinated Kepler. He expressed this fascination in this quotation. He said, "Geometry has two great treasures. One is the theorem of Pythagoras, and the other, the division of a line into mean and extreme ratio. The first we may compare to a mass of gold, the second we may call a precious jewel." So this triangle is really important for us as traders. We're combining two of the great treasures, according to Kepler, one of the brightest mathematicians in history, when he said we got both the Pythagorean theorem and the golden mean in one geometric shape. And so that's what we're going to base our number sequence on when we use retracements. So now let's go back and revisit the Gann series of numbers and compare that series of numbers with the numbers that are derived from the Pyramid of Giza. On the right-hand side, we have the Gann numbers. Remember the eighths? So there's the series of numbers. But remember, Gann made reference specifically to 50%. And he said once the market goes past 50%, the next most important number is 3/4. So that's why I've highlighted these two numbers, 50% and 75%. To Gann, these were very important numbers. Now let's compare these numbers with the Fibonacci, or if you want to call them the Kepler numbers. Okay, so from that number sequence derived from the Kepler triangle, we have 38.2. 48.6, 61.8, and 78.6. Do you notice that 78.6 is very close to 75, and also 48.6 is very close to 50%? Let's see what this looks like on a chart. I've plotted both the Gann numbers and the Kepler numbers here together. And so taking this range from this low to this high, The green lines are showing you the 8th divisions that Gann discussed. The blue lines are the Kepler/Fibonacci numbers. Here's 38.2%. You see how close that lands to the Gann level. Here's 48.6. It lands very close to the 50% line. 61.8 is very close to the 5/8 line. And 78.6 is over here, right beside the 3/4. Now these arrows here are pointing at the 50% and the 75% of Gann, or if you want to call it the 48.6 and the 78.6 levels. These are the very important levels that we're going to be focusing on here going forward. So this is just a good illustration of how close these numbers are sometimes. So which number series should I use, Gann or Kepler? For the remainder of the initiate level 1, we'll be using only the series that I'll call the Kepler series of numbers going forward. If I had to choose between the two sets and use only one, I would choose the Kepler set. But as you'll find out at the apprentice level, it really depends on what stage of growth or decay that the financial instrument is experiencing at the moment that you're trying to interact with it. The numbers and the ratios that we use really depend on what frequency or what octave that particular financial product is vibrating at. So now that we have a set of numbers to work with, let's look at the tools in our Geometric Traders toolkit.